We shall now move into the final session for today, Innovation Without Borders, Science, Technology and Innovation in Malaysia and Beyond. To introduce the speakers for this session, please welcome Hafriz Abdul Rahman, Senior Vice President of Investments at Khazanah. Over to you, Hafriz.
Innovation has been crucial as a cornerstone of growth and development, being the driving force that transforms products, industries, and ultimately, the rakyat's everyday lives. In today's interconnected world, innovation knows no boundaries. As brilliant minds from diverse corners of the world come together to tackle global challenges and create groundbreaking solutions. For the next session, we will hear from 5 different leaders who embodies innovation without borders. Our first speaker today, Khailee, is a dynamic entrepreneur and venture capitalist known for his remarkable contributions to the startup ecosystem. Khailee first established himself in the Malaysia startup scene with GroupsMore and the online news company Says.com, both companies he founded and sold by the age of 30. Now, as managing partner for 500 Global, a Silicon Valley multi-stage venture capital firm, Khailee spent the last decade supporting early-stage companies from all corners of the world, particularly in this region where he founded 500's Southeast Asian practice. His first 50-seed investments gave rise to 5 unicorns and 3 IPOs to the likes of Grab, Kasem, Bukalapak, Carousel, and eFishery. Through his leadership on the 500 board of officers, Khailee has shaped the firm's global expansion and investment strategies. 500 has evolved into a $2.4 billion AUM firm by providing seed and growth capital for almost 3,000 companies spanning 80 countries with an impressive portfolio of about 40 unicorns. Today, Khailee will be unveiling 500's latest research on how the first 5 billion internet users have been responsible for creating a staggering $30 trillion in market cap. The research will shed light on patterns of opportunity for the next 3 billion internet users and how each country, including Malaysia, can harness these opportunities to their advantage. Please join us in welcoming Khailee with a special KMFW look into 500's latest research, The Rise of the Next.
Check, test. Snoop Dogg, come on in the house. There's right, this is a gold standard. I am no longer speaking for any conferences that do not introduce speakers with a hip-hop song, right? So I know that Easter egg is in there for some of you. Good job, Khazanah. Okay, today we've got some, this is going to be a fun session, right? This is going to be the entertainment session. We will be talking about lessons from the first 5 billion internet users. Why? It's because we have to size up this opportunity. Everyone in this room already knows that innovation is a big topic. Investing in tech is a big deal. But how big? We have to take a closer look. We are also going to be talking about innovation beyond the US and China because the past 5 billion internet users are not all contained in US and China. The story is much broader than that. Lastly, if we know how big the opportunity is, where the opportunity is, what the sectors are, what are the drivers, what are we going to do about it? Will there be enough countries that are not US and China making the right moves? Are we going to be winning or losing in the developmental bargain? Now, at 500 Global, we are obsessed with these questions. We are obsessed about it because whether we return money from our LPs or not depends on it. It's our livelihood. We've been investing for the past 12 years in 80 countries. We've invested in about 2,800 startups. Close to 40 of them have already become a billion-dollar company. And many more of them are starting to rise. Here, closer to home, we've kind of extended the same type of rigor to Malaysia. We've invested in 68 Malaysian companies. We're one of the most active VCs in Malaysia, if not the most active. We have over 120 companies in Southeast Asia operating here in Malaysia. Now, not only that, we've seen that there is a bargain almost to bet on Malaysian talent. Our second largest office outside of Palo Alto, outside of the US, is in Malaysia with 40 staff members. Now, collectively, we care about these questions. We're investing in funds which last for 10 years. We need to know what will happen in the next 10 years. That's exactly what I hope to speak to you about here today. First off, diving right in. To have 5 billion internet users, let's look at the pace to which they came. It took 20 years for the first 2.5 billion internet users to come online, but only 10 years for the next 2.5 billion to do the same. Now, looking at popular projections, there will be another 3 billion internet users to come online. But this 3 billion internet users is estimated to take up to 2040 for them to come online. One thing we've learned is that every historical estimate on internet user adoption speeds have been wrong. It's always been underestimated. This may come a little bit faster than we think. Now, if we speed up over here, why? What's driving all of this? We can actually build out internet users into 3 layers of a global tech stack. At the base of it is hardware. Hardware of connected global devices continues to grow at 22% CAGR and continue at double-digit CAGRs. We see that internet connection, this green chunk, this is 4G LTE. It continues to grow, but the cost, which is this yellow line, continues to drop. What else? We see here that in e-commerce, every country is starting to grow more and more in e-commerce penetration. We see content from streaming platforms, video and music as well continue to take very large market share. It continues to grow. Services from ride-hailing to fintech to health tech, all these things continue to grow as well. So if hardware and connectivity enabled all of us to actually build and use software, this is the first basis of that concept, the global tech stack. We split it up just like this. How much value has this created? It has already created, on the hardware side, the likes of NVIDIA, Tesla, and Apple, connectivity, all of the biggest telcos in the world. We look at software, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, to which this lens, we can actually calculate that it has provided us $30 trillion in publicly listed companies across the tech stack. And we can also see that software is about half of all of that. Now, how about the next $30 trillion? Currently, there is a bit of a myopia with a lot of innovators, and we advise a lot of our entrepreneurs as well. It appears that the low-hanging fruit is to innovate for the existing internet users we know. We'll be creating yet another fintech app or yet another delivery of on-demand of something, and all that is fine and dandy, and some of that actually makes quite good money. But this is only part of the story. The next 3 billion, this is the part that's a bit more mysterious to all. Because the next 3 billion may come from farms. They may come from tier 5 cities, not even tier 2 or 3. What are their needs? Who's figured it out? What are the patterns that we can translate? Innovating for the next 3 billion is mysterious, but that mystery is priced in. It's going to be pretty exciting to look into. But most of all, this is like a Moore's law kind of thing. It's like a multiplicatory effect when you have 5 billion internet users interacting with another 3 billion more new ones. So that scale of connection, that would be incredibly. I'll just give you a quick example. A few years ago, we backed an entrepreneur who was building a dating app for Muslims. And he was a former Petronas member, actually. He used to work at Petronas. He's originally from Egypt. If not enough Muslim nations had connected to the internet, that business would not have been very successful. It had features like parents meeting other parents built into the app, right? It was eventually acquired. It was actually acquired by Match.com, and he led all the Muslim market dating apps and dating initiatives, right? So it's an incredible story, right? But if you think about having the next 3 billion come online, what ideas today are too small, but later will be big? Okay, we keep going. This is not a new thing. I hope to show you data to illustrate that this type of global interest in building things, it's already happening. And it is happening across the startup stage, unicorn stage, to the public market stage, and even the biggest tech giants. 130 countries today have venture-backed startup activity. Think about that for a moment. It means that someone believed enough to have venture capital money go and back startups in those countries. 130 of these countries. We see over here that 55 of those countries have already produced a unicorn. Of course, Malaysia as well. So if out of the 130 countries, more than a third of them have proven themselves to create like outliers and outcomes that are financially attractive, what's next? Now, if we take a look back at US unicorns, like this is some really cool stuff. 55% of US unicorns were founded or co-founded by immigrants. First-gen immigrants, mind you, right? They may have come there for school or whatnot, right? Then, of course, like 80% have an immigrant founder or an immigrant in a key leadership role at these unicorns. When you break that down, we're like, okay, so where are they coming from? India is a huge contributor over there. Israel as well. There's UK there. There's a bit of China. There's a bit of Russia, right? Interesting. Kinds of countries and diaspora making it big in Silicon Valley. But the immigrant-founded unicorns are massive. SpaceX, Elon Musk is not American, just FYI, right? We have Stripe, one of our portfolio companies as well. Instacart, so and so forth. There's plenty of companies where immigrant talent who has global understanding went to the US and built truly global companies. Okay, so we've seen this in public tech companies. We've seen this in unicorns. This analysis that we've done was quite telling for us. The green part is the share of revenues that are non-US. For a $1 billion company plus, a publicly listed US company that is worth $1 billion, about 28%. When you go to a $10 billion company, a $25 billion company, a $50 billion company, and then a $100 billion company, the share of rest of the world revenues increases. It's directly correlated. You want to go big? You have to go global. We look at the biggest of the big, these tech giants. You can call them US tech giants, but they're in fact mostly global tech giants. Aside from Amazon, you have Microsoft, Alphabet, Apple, and NVIDIA having 50% or more of the revenues, depending on the rest of the world. So, if I've made the case now that everything we talked about this morning for the global south even, or for some other markets, a sensitivity instead of going global, not just going global, but at every single stage for you to almost become hyper-local, the argument here is this. You want to capture the next $30 trillion, it will require an even deeper and nuanced understanding of global than ever before, which is why I use the word hyper-local. Okay, so where, right? Well, which are some of these markets? We can go for the obvious, oh, hey, let's expand this, let's have a China office. Okay, maybe India, right? There's some kind of usual suspects. But our interest here is in the unusual suspects. Why? Because it's priced in. So let's have a look. Now, why did we focus 1 year of research into a report that doesn't talk about US and China? Why did we do that? This is because the fundamental interest lies beyond that. US and China for so many years have been over-covered as though they are two heavyweights boxing against one another in the ring. Rest of us, we hope to have ringside seats to say, hey, how's this going to play out? What's going to happen between the both of them? Like, ooh, good punch right there, right? And we see that, oh, okay, who win, who lose, how's it going to affect me, right? Did we forget that we are in the ring too? Did we forget we're not innocent bystanders to this match? We are fighters in the ring. That's why the report talks about this. Our report excludes the US and China. Our report goes a bit deeper to say, okay, who's growing faster than the US? Whose real GDP growth is faster than the US? We take and we start to rank them. We rank them, the ones which are the biggest out of that pool that's growing faster than the US. Rank them by nominal GDP. And then we have a minimum threshold for political stability. And we've come up with what we call the Rise 30. There are 30 countries that we look at. The Rise 30 are interesting because they're expected to, collectively, they're expected to surpass the US and China in GDP in 5 years from now. The Rise 30 are interesting because collectively they have a larger population than the US and China combined. They're interesting also because they're growing faster, whether it's for population or GDP per capita. They're interesting because they're also younger. They're interesting because they are rural. That's super interesting, right? See the dichotomy of that and understand the need to understand rural digitization. It's so great. And they are even more connected. That's a real irony, right? There's a mobile penetration across the Rise 30 are even more than the mature economies, which we call the M5, the mature 5 in our analysis, right? So they're more social, they spend more time in social media, they are more engaged as content consumers for video streaming and music streaming. They are less penetrated by e-commerce, good opportunity there, less penetrated by fintech, and most of all, they're less penetrated by investments. Venture capital will have a role to capture the value that lies in the Rise 30. So our second argument is this. The next decade will not just be defined by US and China, but also the rise economies. Okay, we need to know. We need to start quantifying, okay, what are we going to do? Who's there? Who's at what level? We've come up with this very simple ratio, which is the total amount of venture capital dollars last year divided by the GDP, the nominal GDP of each of these countries. We wanted to get a yardstick where you can kind of like normalize it to the size of your country, and you start to see that, wow, Singapore's kind of got quite a lot of venture capital relative to their GDP, and they both, Singapore and Israel outstrip the US, but of course US is much larger GDP, right? So you kind of think about that way. But for the rest of these countries, you start to at least get a bit of a yardstick. Hey, do we have enough venture capital or do we have too much? We need to solve this argument once and for all, right? Are we like over-inflating this market or not? This gives us a bit of a yardstick. We went a little bit further. I know some of you are squinting to look at Malaysia, so I just put Malaysia out there. Or you're saying, okay, so there you go, right? Okay, 0.19%, okay, venture capital dollars last year over our nominal GDP. Let's go. This helps us also to stack rank, like what is the gap from one country to another. Right? We'll see that, of course, again, Israel and Singapore don't have a gap versus the US. But if Mexico wanted to have the level of venture capital penetration in its economy, it would have to attract 11 billion US dollars to get there. Actually, that's not that far, right? It just feels like, okay, it's kind of like possible. At least gives you a milestone to go for, right? Good news is, the Rise 30, they're not sitting around, letting other people take the cake. They're trying to stimulate venture capital in their own markets as well. So they've done pretty well. Their venture capital penetration has been increasing rapidly over the years. But the bad news is, the venture funding gap, the distance to the US, continues to increase. Why is this so? Of course, you can see most of these countries, a lot of the sovereign wealth funds, okay, we need to invest in venture and asset class. Hey, let's back some of the Silicon Valley VCs, right? There's one dynamic of that, which is important, it's reasonable, it's incredibly rational. But if US continues to outpace everybody else, and the new economy is supposed to be a multiplier for the economy as a whole, we don't want a world where the rich continues to get richer in terms of countries and poor continues to poorer. We want to reverse some of that. So the venture penetration gap should close. We hope for it to close. Okay, how about Malaysia's venture? Okay, I know that's what you're all wondering, so I had a dedicated slide for Malaysia right here, okay? So Malaysia's venture penetration is only 2.1 billion ringgits behind Indonesia, 15 billion ringgits behind the US, and 36 billion ringgits behind Singapore. This means if you wanted a benchmark to kind of benchmark yourself against, all you need to do is stimulate that amount of money, and we should be getting ourselves there. The Rise 30, if you want to look just at venture capital dollars, because that's input, how about output? So what if you pour the money in there, right? Are the unicorns rising? Okay, so that's what we have here. The value of all the billion-dollar tech companies in each of these countries. Malaysia is at $1.7 billion. We're first investors in Qasem. They're a great company, continue to really believe in what they do. US is right there on top in the total worth. But again, once we divide this by the GDP, you start to see that, whoa, Singapore's punching above its weight class. Everybody else, we're playing a catch-up game, but I think we're going to get there. All right. I've given you the idea of how important these markets are to any company that wants to be incredibly valuable. The next 30 trillion. I've zoomed in a little bit on some yardsticks and benchmarks so we can measure our progress towards it. So what should every other country do about it? I have 3 things to say, and I should have said it before I click on the slide, but I have 3 things to say. It's ownership, ownership, ownership. 2018, I wrote an article on The Edge that spoke only about ownership. What I did was I just put out a table and say, hey, these are the largest tech companies in Southeast Asia. How many % of these tech companies are owned by which country? So you can start to see that some unicorns that emerge from Indonesia or Malaysia or elsewhere, the ownership doesn't reflect the country they were born. The ownership is owned by somebody else, some other countries, a collective of other countries. Ownership, ownership, ownership is so important because we're capitalists after all. I don't know if anyone's ever played a game of Monopoly where you refuse to buy any property. You just end up paying all of the rent. Capitalism is just about owning the best assets. We need to think about a way where there's an ownership lens. The work that we do at 500, again, because it spans 80 countries, we engage with a lot of challenger nations, I call it, like Kazakhstan or Georgia and whatnot. And they're not trying to make the same mistake. They're trying to say, hey, it's not just about developing their startup ecosystem, it's about owning it as well. Developing is like planting all these durian saplings, and then they grow into this durian orchard that's stimulating the ecosystem. But if the actual durians itself are owned by somebody else, That is the development trap. You talk about the development gamble, winners and losers. I think that if you sold, you did all the work with the saplings and the orchard, but you gave away all your durians, like that is a really big miss. So ownership, ownership, ownership. We have to own the durians we grow. In fact, we can own other people's durians that they've grown. Right? That's even better, right? Okay. So that is the big thing that that I think countries can do. So I'm going to kind of zoom, fast forward a little bit, because state-owned investors are making moves. They have a huge role to play in this. The largest state-owned investors have been making moves into venture. Currently, it stands at 1.4% on average is the allocation to venture capital. And we see that this is actually growing. Global SWF tracks a lot of this data. They've revealed here the top 50 sovereign wealth funds in the world stacked by allocation to venture capital. I don't know how they got the data, but it's there. You can Google it. Malaysian Khazanah is there, and Malaysian sovereign wealth funds are also part of it. So this is a slightly older version of the deck here, but I'll just read out over here. So in 2022, 328 investments were done by these state-owned institutions, not enterprises, sorry, state-owned institutions. 120 of them were investments into Silicon Valley firms, but the rest being distributed across 32 countries. I want to play that stat because it's not like the state-owned institutions not doing anything. They are actually making the right moves to diversify away from just focusing on US or China. Okay, now in closing, in October 5th, which is kind of after this thing, and I'm going to fly there for it, we're actually launching this report publicly. All of the slides I talked about, all of its data sets will be available to anyone to download. We're launching it at a conference we're having in Washington, D.C. that brings together policymakers, sovereign interests, as well as like entrepreneurs and asset allocators. And I think this type of conversation, or where all of us can collaborate, where we're not the only ones doing things in isolation, I think speaks very well to the theme of KMF. We're going to go through a whole, there are test sheets. I'm going to just go through this very quickly on which sectors came to rise. You know, like for example, in India, it was e-commerce. Canada, it was software. Singapore, you know, which South Korea, Indonesia, so on and so forth, right? Like we split into high income, middle income, and look at which sectors rise first. What are the factors which are very important to actually analyze it, which will make it very easy, right? So we show all this, Mexico, Indonesia, the whole rise study, we've got these test sheets, which accumulate to also like a larger data set that we're including in the report. So I'm just going to exercise my thumb over here to get through it. Egypt, Romania, Pakistan, Colombia, Peru, New Zealand, world tour. We have plenty of data for those who actually like data. So that way, you can come to your own conclusions. You can refine your portfolio allocation as you think about geographic new economy opportunities. This is the second most important QR code. If you scan this, it'll pop up like an email link. I will email you the report. I will email you this report. It's going to come within like this week or next week. You know, it'll within the next 10 days. Yes, you can scan this. This is the second most important QR code, because later there's one that is whether you like this presentation or not, that's the most important one that you also have scanned. Right? Okay, so my time's up. I'm wrapping up right now, but I'm going to flex it a little bit more to leave you with a story. The titans of the new economy today, they look a little bit like this. You have Elon Musk being talked about a lot, OpenAI, Sam Altman, you got Bill Gates, you got Mark Zuckerberg, you got Jeff Bezos. You can think of a few other tech titans, but they roughly look like that. I kind of like Jensen Huang because he's kind of like has a bit of diversity and inclusion there. I also like the consistency of the Terminator jacket, so I should have put him up there actually. The next 10 years, these faces of tech titans, are they going to be very, very different after all? I say that we can actually do this. We are placing those bets. And 10 years from now, hopefully I'll be reinvited back for KMF, right? Then I'll show you a few other faces, right? That has even more global representation. So this is me, So this is me, Khailee Young. Thank you, everyone. I hope you'll join us and 500 Global in investing in ourselves, in the challenger nations like Malaysia, like the rest of the world, and so we can really shape the development bargain for all of us to win. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Khailee. Our next speaker, Ethan Lin, is the co-founder and CEO of Klook. With an unwavering passion for travel, Ethan has emerged as a driving force behind one of Asia's leading travel experiences platform. Founded in 2014, Klook inspires and enables more moments of joy for travelers with over 500,000 curated quality experiences across 2,500 destinations around the world. You can swim with the Bajau Laut in Semporna, Sabah, or go trekking to the Langtang Valley in Kathmandu, Or more recently, Klook filled up the blank space that I and many thousands of other Taylor Swift fans had by providing once-in-a-lifetime chance to experience a concert tour in Singapore. As a global citizen, Ethan drives Klook's mission to bring the world closer together through experiences, while he navigates through a post-COVID era, the proliferation of social media, and the rise of AI. Ladies and gentlemen, let us take a journey with Ethan Lin.
Well, thank you so much. It was actually very interesting how my session is right after Chaos, because what he mentioned earlier perfectly demonstrates what Klook has become. We deal with non-US, non-China. We are going global. Myself is a quasi-immigrant, and we are serving the existing internet users, and you will see why. So, who we are, right? Klook is Asia's leading platform for experiences and travel services. We make it so easy to book anytime, anywhere for all the travelers at your fingertips. And our mission has been simple and yet powerful since day one. How can we bring the world closer through incredible experiences? We believe travel is beyond just going to a new cities, a new destination. It's about embracing cultures, forging connections, and also creating incredible memories that can last for your life. So for doing that, we have continual progress, and now we are serving users all over the world with 15 languages and over 65 million monthly visitors and over 30 million downloads. And we are the love choices for the younger generations, the Gen Z and Millennial. Right? 90% of our users are between age from 18 to 43. Perfect example about the existing internet users that we're serving through their changing behavior. So with all that users, what service do we cover? We serve over 500,000 of services across the world right now, covering over 2,000 destinations worldwide. Whether you want a skip pass, skip the line pass, or attraction tickets to Universal Studio, or a simple local cooking class and a cultural tour experiences, you get it all covered at your fingertips at a Klook app. So with that, with the fast-growing users, huge internet existing users that we are targeting, a big travel demand that's upcoming, we have been ahead of our own trajectory, and we are also turning profitable at a large scale. So we are reaching an annualized run rate of $3 billion US sales, and that's actually around 3 times growth compared to pre-COVID. That's how fast the last 12 months has been for Klook. So how we do that, and what are the topics for today? So for today, there are 4 topics I want to quickly cover. First, while we are in the travel recovery, what are some of the travel industry tailwinds? Second, what is experiences? Why did that become the new travel currencies that the younger generation is looking forward to do? And to power that, to power all this type of experiences that the market has to offer, how can we match the demand with each individual need? So how AI and technology play a role in the new tech and in the new travel. And last but not least, I want to touch a bit about the new rising trend, the rise of Klook creators and also the new social media in travel. So first, to start with, where we are in the travel recoveries. Quite straightforward, 2023 being the first year that since pandemic with all of Asia's market open to travelers. And when you look at it, in the US and Europe, travel has already fully recovered, with US even exceeding 2019's level. But in Asia, we are 1 year behind, recovering to around 75% of the US and Europe, and also compared to before the pre-COVID level. And the tourists are slowly but cautiously returning to their favorite destinations. Right? If you look at the arrivals of some of the countries as examples, right, Thailand, Singapore, Malaysia are all recovered of international arrivals to around 75% in the recent months. And then what do they prefer to go? Right, so as the market is opening up, with still COVID in mind, just 1 year away, people do prefer to travel closer to home or somewhere nearby. So that actually making Japan as the top 1 destinations across Asia Pacific. And I'm sure many of you may have the upcoming plan to Japan. And with Thailand and Singapore followed by that, based on our recent market survey and insight. So what are the catalysts? Right? Why travel is a long-term thing? We continue seeing a lot of amazing things happening, right? Growing immersive experiences in a destinations. Harry Potter Studio Tour just opened in Tokyo, and we were the launching partners. And 3 months tickets all sold out and all reserved. And we were also dealing with the Taylor Swift concert, as Harris mentioned earlier. Right, all of these incredible experiences are happening all over the different destinations that drive the attention of the different visitors. And of course, you have the 2024 Paris Olympic upcoming, which will make Europe, all the cultural experiences become much, much more popular for all the consumers. And Japan, right, continue to grow Japan as a destination with the Osaka World Expo 2025. So all of that happening in the travel industry, making experiences become the new travel currencies. It's not because there's a flight, hence you go to a destination, you go to a city. It's also not because there's a new hotels open. Or maybe for some, hotelists, you really go when there's Amman open. For most of the mass market consumers and travelers, they go because what that destination has to offer, because what you can do in that cities, in that countries. So hence, experience become the top of mind of what people do or what consider to do when they go travel. So in the recent MasterCard spending behavior, what we see is consumers actually spending more on experiences and services over the physical good when they travel into another cities. It's not because they can buy something in their cities, in their destinations, it's because they can do something very different than what they can do at home. So what are some of the top experiences among the APAC, Gen Zs and millennials? Very interesting trend, then you understand what different markets of consumers are thinking about. Entertainment event, top among the travelers from Australia, mainland China, and Thailand. They drive to a destination because there's something very interesting happening. Guess what market really into spa and massage? Right, no surprise. People with a lot of work pressure from Singapore, from Hong Kong, from Korea, from Japan. Right, so everywhere they go, they're looking for massage, they're looking for hot spring. Right, average Hong Kong visitors will book for 2.5 massage whenever they go travel. I know, I don't understand, they must be under a lot of pressure from work. Right, cultural experiences, very interesting. For place, for market with a rich cultural dynamic, when the visitor, when they go around, they also want to experience the different cultures. You see 61% of the travelers from Malaysia, from Vietnam, when they go to other places, they really want to experience something different. They want to experience the different cultures. And also, similarly, for natural and outdoor activities, which has been a growing trend that we see what consumers are booking these days. Right? For users from Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Philippines, that they actually have a lot of things to do that they can do during their domestic travel. They're also looking for something similar when they're going abroad. So with that kind of trend, that what the new generation are looking forward to do, what does that mean for Klook? What are we continue working on our supply side? So we continue bringing new experiences and services to the travelers that we see their growing preference and a growing trend. We have been designing Klook City Experience Pass. A one city pass, you can go to all the cultural and the local attractions, experiences, or food kind of dining places at a very reasonable cost. We continue looking at the TikTok, IG, place people can take photos. That's very important. I know we're not at the industry conference here, but if anyone do, people taking photos, people like to share, which is actually my next topic that I will share how we actually look at Instagram and the TikTok. And also entertainment and music event. People drive into a market because there's something big happening. Right? There's a Christmas, there's a New Year countdown, there's a mega event that's happening in the market. And also, the outdoor tours and activities that continue to grow. People are looking for that kind of space and the natural that they haven't been able to go out after 3 years of the pandemic. So we continue working on the services that adding to over 500,000 of the service that we are offering to the consumers. So with all these informations at your fingertip, everyone is very different. Right? Someone prefers a cooking class, someone may have a family, want to take them to a Disney theme park. How you make sure within an app, in such a limited space, you're matching the demand with the supply, you're matching the interest of each individual. AI comes in, right? AI comes in to help with efficiency and also personalizations. So there are two categories of AI that Klook has been working on. The first one we call discriminative AI, which is a bit different from the generative AI that people are talking about. And this has been there in the market for a few years. And many companies have been working on this with a lot of data scientists. It's basically predicting a pattern and the behavior as a consumer keep using the app and keep looking at their travel patterns. So each person, the more and more they're using Klook app, the more and more they are looking at the things that are interesting to their own individual interests and their family need. So the personalization, the search and recommendation, and this has been developing. And in the future, what you can imagine is the app can already know what you are interested in, and 80% of the things that you're looking at is really tailored to your travel preference. Out of that, millions of services offered from a destinations. And the next one, which is the generative AI, the most talked about topic in the last 12 months. So it indeed has reached a very crucial area that it can be applicable to a lot of the consumer platform. So for us, there's two major areas has been working on. We're covering 15 languages. We need to make sure the translation, the localization has been seamlessly globally. And AI play a very important part in the fundamental transformation for that. And on top of that, there's a digital concierge, which we call Kai. So we have been beta, and so let me introduce you Kai. Kai is our digital concierge that we've been beta launched in the last 2 months, and we will be rolling out through all the touch points with our consumers through our app. So here is a quick demonstration of Kai. Excuse me. So for sub tours in KL, through CAP, you can ask any type of questions. It's literally your digital concierge that's powered by a powerful AI and with all the algorithms that we built and fit into it. You can ask them what about experiences. It wrote something just amazingly give you a sense of what this tool has to offer. You can also continue asking questions. Is this friendly for kids? Should I bring my kids there? Right? What is the cancellation policies? This serves as such a great tool to continue to improve the conversion rate as we serve our consumers. And we are going to follow it up. Right? So now you understand how the technology has been able to empower a further growth of the sector to deal with the amount of the information. What are the new trends from the consumers? Right? How the new Gen Zs are looking at the things. So that brings to the last topic for today, the rise of Klook, of the Klook creators and the new social media in travel. Let me ask a quick question. How many of you here understand hashtag ASMR? Please raise your hand. Oh, I was expecting much less than that. Okay, we have a very savvy social media generation here. It means a tingly sensation being generated for the consumers whenever they use TikTok or YouTube or Reel. What about hashtag FYP? Anyone? Okay, we definitely have the younger generation here in the crowd. I love that. It means from your For You page. It's a hashtag that helped the system and your own page, your own fan page, to tailor to what people are looking for. So it's able to link up a lot of the data in a lot of the social media app. All right, enough hashtag gatekeeping. So let's talk about social and creators. It's not new. It's already a norm. Right? You've been seeing this in the last 5 years. It's all over the place. But what's the implication? We have seen a significant shift of trend for the younger generation how they get inspiration, where they should be going, what do they want to do, how they plan their itineraries. What feels more natural to you? Who still have one of this booklet from Lonely Planet or Time Out? Can Oh, I would expect so much more than just a few hands there, right? So that feels the most natural way 10 years ago. 5 years ago, you go to Google, you search, right, what to do, what are the content in your destinations. Now, in the last 12 months, we see a big behavior change for the younger generation. They go to all the content social media sites and searching for what to do in KL, right? What's the new trend things? What's a restaurant? Where can I meet up with a local friend? Right? That is what's more natural for the younger generations. So during our survey, our recent Travel Plus survey, right, 67% of the users like to review the readings and also check the reviews. So they will go to our app and look at over 10 million reviews being written by people who already booked it. And with a lot of content has been generating through all the different social media sites. And more than 50% of Gen Zs in APAC will use social media as the #1 tool for inspiration and planning. And no surprise, 87% of them will write their own content, will share with their friends, will try to record in their memories. And that brings into Klook Creators, a program that we continue to upgrade and bring the society together. So what is Klook Creators? It's a social communities of influencers across the entire Asia Pacific that fuels the passions for travel and for content creations. Right, if you go search Klook something throughout all the social site, you will see a lot of content has been empowered by us. So why a social community? Because consumers are looking for authentic review. People care about different people's lifestyle and what is real. So hence, they look into this all sort of the UGC contents that are created by the creators in the market. And these creators become the travel ambassadors for a lot of the consumers when they go travel around to their destinations. So where are the content presented? But no surprise, you have YouTube, have TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and also not to mention many other regional ones. Lemonade, Xiaohongshu, Little Red Book, Twitters, Naver, Lime, many, right? So the content has been spreading out, and this become one of the major sources for the new younger generation to look for inspirations. So for us, we have been covered over 13,000 creators across Asia Pacific throughout the many years of working with them. In just less than a year, across 13 social media platforms I share with you, and we have more than 55,000 posts and over 1.8 billion reach and views. We make a lot of places very popular. For example, the Shibuya Sky is the #1 trendy Instagrammable places on Instagram and TikTok. Right? A must-go places in Tokyo, in the center of the Shibuya Scramble Square, that people can take nice photos. So all of this was created by these 13,000 creators in the market. So for that, we are happy to be on a journey to be the world's largest social travel communities from this perspective to fuel the destination and experiences discovery. So for today, some takeaway for any of the travel last year, right? What up with the travel and the tech sectors? Travel industry tailwinds. We are seeing accelerating growth with increasing in-flight capacities and also a lot of upcoming mega events. Travel is no longer a luxury spending. It's necessity to all the generation, not even to the younger generations. Second, experiences become the new travel currencies. We are seeing higher spending experiences and services, and to serve them, we have to personalize to each individual's interest and need. And then how tech play in a role, right? AI is very powerful. You continue building the infrastructure, you empower the connectivity, and you are leveraging AI to make it more efficient, and you serve the consumer better. But do understand the difference between a discriminative AI and generative AI, and both serve as a very important components for the consumers. And last but not least, the new rise of the social media and Klook creators. So social media will be prevalent among the next generations of travelers, the #1 tool they're going to use. And with the powerful, continued growing community of Klook creators, over 13,000 creators as the travel ambassadors, we can continue bringing the word to all the consumers. So thank you so much, and that's my sharing for today.
Thank you, Ethan. Our next speaker, Jan Nicholas from Deloitte Consulting. Jan leads Deloitte's semiconductor industry consulting practice in Southeast Asia and has recently moved to Penang after spending over 6 years in Hong Kong previously to lead Deloitte's newly launched Penang Consulting Office. With over 25 years of global experience in operations, engineering, and consulting, Jan is deeply passionate about the semiconductor industry, which he believes is currently at an inflection point. And Malaysia, a country responsible for about 14% of the global semiconductor production, stands to benefit from this change. Faced with a backdrop of ever-changing demand, supply chain constraints, geopolitical tensions, and talent shortages, Jan will outline how Malaysia can navigate itself to take advantage of its position and established presence in the semiconductor industry. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Jan Nicholas.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here, and I was even more thrilled this morning when speaker after speaker talked about how important my topic was. Really enjoyed that. So what I'd like to do is spend just a few minutes talking about the context for why this is exciting and why this is important. And I'd like to talk about a few of the trends that we're seeing in the semiconductor industry. We can't talk about all of them. We don't have the time for it. But I'd like to pick a few highlights that build on some of the things that speakers this morning have talked about, okay? So before I get started, I'm going to introduce a framework that's slightly different than the one that you've seen before. Everyone's heard about Industry 4.0, and it's been talked about a lot in the World Economic Forum. It talks quite a bit about the means of production and the changes in the means of production. I came across a paper about 20 years ago that framed it slightly differently. What they talked about was the 5 techno-economic revolutions that have happened. Relatively similar. This is written by a South American economist, Carlota Perez. And what it talked about was not necessarily the means of production, but the impact of those changes. And what she said was, well, we had the initial industrial revolution, and that's factory production. But if you look on the right-hand side, what it got us was canals and waterways and easier paths to market. And the second one was really steam and railways. And what that got us was telegraph, distribution of gas, ports, greater transport. Steel and electricity and heavy engineering got us into worldwide shipping, transcontinental railways, greater scale. And the age of oil and the automobile and the mass production era, which we're somewhat still in, gave us access to energy. And it gave us transportation networks, global air travel, those sorts of things. So when you think about the one that we're in right now, and this is telecommunications and communication, this really gets us the environment that we're in right now, where we have attendees that are here in person, and we have attendees that are remote, and we can interact simultaneously, which is just absolutely fantastic. Now, what she wrote, which I thought was really interesting, is that there are 3 stages to each of these. And you think of this somewhat as the hype cycle, but you have the installation phase where you have the great innovation and a great experimentation around the new technology, and then you have a transition and a panic and a collapse, and that creates distressed assets that then can be deployed and built on with the maturing technology to get those benefits. And so when you look across all of these, you'll see that there's always this great expansion and great contraction, and then the build out and the deployment. And the interesting thing about this, when I think about it, I'll stop here for a second and think about the age of automobiles. what she said, and this has impacted me very greatly, is that when automobiles were invented, everyone with a garage in the United States had a car company. There are hundreds of car companies. And over time, after that collapse, that technology matured, and there became very few car companies. But the real money wasn't made by the car companies. The real money was made by the infrastructure companies and the transportation and logistics companies and the oil companies. If you think about the largest car company in the world, it's Volkswagen. Last year, they made about 22.5 billion USD in profits. Saudi Aramco made over 6 times that much. So the real value in this is not necessarily in the technology that we find really interesting right now. It's not necessarily NVIDIA, it's the things that NVIDIA is going to enable, the things that AI is going to enable. So when you look at this, the real trigger for this, it started in the 1970s with Intel working on microprocessors. And then we did see that contraction, and we're not yet at all the business models that will be enabled by this and all of that deployment phase. So when we look at this, the deployment phase typically has a few characteristics. You have that maturing technology adopted at scale. It creates greater collaboration. The wealth is created by all those. And then the other thing that's interesting is that the institutions always lag the technological change. And that creates a demand for what we're calling today sustainability. But if you think about the mass production era and the Industrial Revolution, it created demands for unions. It created demands for worker safety. It created demands for public health care and other things. And so we haven't yet seen all of the sustainability that will be demanded by this technological change. Now, what's interesting, when you look at all this, all of these things require semiconductors, right? And the silicon intensity that's going to be driven by the AI and the business models and the build-out of this. And there are very few places in the world that can do this. And Malaysia happens to be one of those places. Malaysia has earned its right on the world stage to compete for a share of this pie. And I've already clicked through it so you can see it, but Malaysia has over 50 years of history. Last year we celebrated 50 years of semiconductors in Malaysia. It's the US largest trading partner for semiconductors. Very few people know that. Almost 14% of global assembly and test happens here. It's 7% of global trade flows. Malaysia is a serious player in this industry and has created the opportunity to benefit from this. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is I'd like to talk through a few of the global trends that we're seeing in semiconductors and talk about how we separate out some of the things we're reading in the media from what's actually happening, and then some of the implications that we might see for Malaysia. Okay? So the first one is that US and Europe are making a lot of noise around what they would like to do. And they would like to have maximum self-sufficiency. The US would like to do that, and they'll invest at home, and they'll invest globally. Europe has lost some of the capability that would enable it to do that, so it'll have to invest overseas. But at the same time, there are very large Asian competitors that will make that very difficult for the US and Europe, and they're not going to let go of their market share very easily. And the other piece is thinking about not just wafer fabs, but in the back end. The multinationals will try to diversify their footprint in the back end. There's only 4 places in the world that they really do back end at scale. There's Korea, there's Taiwan, there's mainland China, and there's Southeast Asia. And so as these supply chains regionalize more and people try to diversify in order to reduce risk, there are only so many places at scale that can do that. And that's one of the reasons why we're very excited about Southeast Asia, and particularly in Malaysia, is because we have that scale and ability to. And as those other geographies may become less attractive from a risk perspective, we think that more global investment will move this way. So what does this actually look like? You see a lot of news with the US and Europe saying the US wants to triple its wafer fab production, and Europe wants to double it. Well, this year, we've seen a bit of a contraction in the semiconductor industry. But all in all, we're going to go from about $600 billion last year to about $1 trillion by 2030. And the US would like to grow, they'd like to triple their share. In order for them to grow about 6x in order to hit 2030, that means they're going to have to hit a 25% CAGR. And as you look through the investments and the announcements, you have to ask yourself, are they really putting in 25% CAGR in order to hit that? And the jury's out. but I don't yet see the indications that's happening, that they're serious about it. We see announcements, we've seen one-time funding, but we haven't seen that commitment to continued funding to grow that. And at the same time, on the right-hand side, you see that everyone else is also investing, which will make it that much more difficult for the US and for Europe to compete. And the other thing that I'll point out here is that China is somewhat secretive in what they announce. They're somewhat secretive in how they do their fundings. They have multiple avenues, multiple ways for the central government to fund this kind of development. And so it's a bit opaque. There's not a good view to it. But I think that the numbers that we have reported here significantly understate how much China's going to put into this. From a global perspective, what you're seeing is that the European companies, of course, are investing in Europe and investing here in Asia. US companies are trying to invest in the US, but also in Europe and Asia. And Asia is really investing for Asia. And Asia wants to maintain its advantage. Right now, Asia has about 80% market share in wafer fab production, and will likely continue. So when you look at the news and you hear all the news about the announcements of the new capacity that will go into the US and will go into Europe, take it with a grain of salt, because the investments that are happening here in Asia are still very, very large. The second thing is looking at MNCs and how they diversify their risks. So we've seen a return of great power politics. We've seen a return of supply chain risk. We've seen a return of war to Europe. And all of those frictions are requiring companies to rethink their supply chains. We're seeing a more regionalization of supply chains, and we're seeing companies expand into geographies that perhaps they haven't expanded into before. The second part is that we're now seeing a regionalization of IP, whereas before, chip companies were able to design one product and sell it worldwide. But now we're seeing IP restrictions that happen coming out of the US and coming out of Europe and coming out of Japan, where we have to be much more careful about which products get sold to whom, where. And that's creating a fragmentation of capacity and supply chains and products. And companies have to consider that when they're planning for this new capacity and where they're planning for which products they'll make, where they'll sell them, and how they'll sell them. And in addition, we have to think about climate change, environmental disasters, things like that. Well, the great thing for Malaysia is when you look at these things, Malaysia is a very politically stable country, very safe, not a lot of natural disasters, and from an IP perspective, it's neutral. You don't have to worry about IP restrictions for IP that's generated here in Malaysia. So it's a great opportunity for countries like Malaysia that have an indigenous semiconductor industry to create IP of value and to create the environment that's safe for these multinationals to invest. When you look at what this looks like on the map, you see that TSMC all of a sudden is expanding into a lot of places it hasn't been before. Now, it's had wafer fabrication in the US, but it's expanding significantly in Arizona. Samsung has not had leading nodes before, and they're starting to invest in leading nodes. STMicro has been in Morocco for a very long time, since the 1970s, but all of a sudden they're expanding in Morocco quite significantly. And one thing I'd like to point out that I find very interesting is that if you look at the media narrative, there's, especially in the West, they talk about how companies might be shifting away from China, but you see a Chinese company, Gortek, is investing outside of China. What you're seeing is this bifurcation of in China for China and China plus one that we've seen in other industries. So it's not as though people are fleeing China. What they're actually doing is diversifying their supply chains. You're seeing it by Chinese companies investing outside. Three more I'd like to call attention to. Micron announcing and getting started on their assembly site in India. India's been trying to attract assembly and test for quite a while now. The second one is GlobalFoundries has just set up a remote control site in Penang, by the way, which I'm very happy with, where they will be able to monitor their operations in Singapore from Penang, and they're hoping to use that in order to manage operations globally out of different distributed centers. And then the third one is ASML has reportedly been working with their suppliers on Southeast Asia footprint, which would be very good for Malaysia because semiconductor capital equipment has been highly concentrated in Singapore with KLA and with Applied Materials and ASM and several others. And Malaysia got its first large wafer fab equipment factory with Lam Research. And it would be fantastic to see a cluster spring up around wafer fab equipment and semiconductor capital equipment in Malaysia as well. So this is very exciting. What you're seeing is people moving into areas they haven't moved into before and being more comfortable with it. And that's a good thing for Malaysia as well. We've talked a little bit about the talent shortage and how this is a challenge. And this is a challenge for everyone right now. This localization of manufacturing, the regionalization of supply chains, it's the growth of the industry plus this duplication of effort in the supply chains is really stretching the talent market thin. And at the same time, as Dr. Eric Lee said earlier, this hasn't been a terribly exciting industry for students to go into for a few decades. And all of a sudden, it's exciting again. And what that means is that a lot of the people that have the capabilities and have the knowledge are my age. And because of that, you're seeing the talent gap, but you're also seeing that people, as they grow older, are less flexible around their work. They're less willing to move to new places and open new factories and new geographies because they have a family and they've got kids. They might have grandkids. They have pets. And they're not as excited about it as people in their 20s. And so this is partly why that Global Foundries facility is so exciting, is because we have the technology now and we have the capability to be able to leverage non-traditional workforces like that and bring in people in different geographies and have them contribute. So what you're going to see is, on one hand, more non-traditional talent. You're also going to see public-private partnerships and university partnerships in order to upskill workers. And you'll also see that there will be more flexibility in guest worker programs, in immigration policies, and other ways that countries that have established industries will seek the talent from countries that have young workforces that need the jobs. And so you'll start to see flexibility around these things. All I'd like to say about this is that this is not just a problem with Malaysia. When we talk about Malaysia, frequently we beat ourselves up and we say, look at us, we've got a talent gap. Look at us, we have these issues. But it's not us, it's everybody. So when you look around here, the US doesn't have the semiconductor workforce. Japan doesn't have the one they want. Korea doesn't have all they want. Even China doesn't have all the workers they want for this. It's a problem for everybody, not just us. Southeast Asia, we've been working proactively on these talent gaps, but no silver bullet has yet emerged. And what you find here, which is somewhat challenging, I think Dr. Faisal said it very well this morning, is that these problems are multifaceted and require larger solutions. So here what we see is somewhat fragmented solutions with people bottoms up trying to solve the problem, partnering together to develop these programs, but nobody's yet hit it perfectly. And that's where the big challenge is for us to solve together as a society and as a culture, is how do we get that workforce working together? And then the last piece I wanted to talk about is sustainability. And what you're seeing in semiconductor companies is they're having the same kind of pressures as other companies. Frequently, their customers are demanding greater sustainability, greater visibility. It's super challenging for microchips because they use a lot of power. They use a lot of water. They use a lot of toxic gases. They use a lot of exotic metals. All of these things are challenging to manage, to report on, to measure, and to improve. And so some have taken a proactive approach. The industry has varying maturity. We could see some more players setting bold targets and moving forward. Frequently, what you see is a lot of carbon offsets. And some companies are more realistic than others about that. And they'll start to move forward to create these strategic alliances to manage it. So what that looks like, from an industry perspective, is that several companies have started to set very aggressive goals. When I look at this, what I notice is that the Europeans are very aggressive and say really soon we'll be at net zero. The Americans are kind of in the middle, and then the Asian companies tend to be towards the tail end and tend to be more realistic. And this is going to be very difficult. And so what I believe is that you'll see a great use of offsets in order to get there, but that solving the real problems is challenging. And on the right, what you see is that we're starting to see companies partner up and down the value chain, and especially with energy companies, on trying to develop these solutions to become more sustainable. What it looks like in Malaysia is that, again, we have varying levels of sustainability. You have some companies that have announced that they'll move towards greater sustainability. You have some that have really put a stake in the ground and said by a certain date we will get to net zero. And you have some that they're setting in the right direction, they're moving in the right direction, but they haven't yet set the goals. And what's holding most companies back here is that the semiconductor industry is really governed by standards bodies. If you think about it, we have a huge ecosystem where a lot of the interoperability of our products requires us to align on how we're going to work together, even though we sometimes compete with one another. We have to have these standards. And so the standards bodies like Semi.org and the other industry associations have been working on how do we solve this? How do we measure greenhouse gas emissions? How do we control it? What are the industry practices we're going to align on to move together? And this is an opportunity for us as leaders, for government, for industry, to work together to help establish these standards and move to create a framework that the industry can adopt. Okay. So with that in mind, I just wanted to throw 5 things out here for people to think about as they look at the industry. The first one is, of course, we've been talking about a lot, is the macroeconomic indicators. And are we going to get a hard landing or a soft landing? And what are rates going to do? And what's inflation going to do? And how does that affect the timing of strong growth? People who've not been involved in the semiconductor industry tend to look at the dynamic swings that happen, because it's a cyclical industry, and get really scared. But if you look over the past 50 years at the 5-year CAGR, what you see is that it moves up and to the right. There's no reason to think that it won't. The only question is when does it come back? The second one is around the geopolitical uncertainties and how does that affect the investment decisions, because this is a highly capital-intensive industry. And again, that's a benefit to Malaysia because Malaysia's safe and neutral. The third one is, as I was saying with the US and their announcements of subsidies, will they be able to deliver on that? We're seeing some hesitancy with investments that are in the US. We're seeing some hesitancy with investments that have been announced for India and others. Will they be able to deliver on that funding and execution? And also, will the MNCs have the patience to work with them and figure out how to work with India and figure out how to work with the US when they have different cultures? And the last one is, as the war for talent heats up, as we move out of this downturn and into expansion again, how will everyone react to the wage inflation that we saw before and the worker turnover that we saw before? So these are all things we'll keep in mind and keep an eye on, and that'll help us understand how the industry moves forward. So with that in mind, I'd like to thank everybody for your time.
Thank you, Jen. Our next speaker, Kelvin Teo, co-founder and group CEO of Funding Societies, a leading peer-to-peer lending platform that has been instrumental in empowering MSMEs across Southeast Asia. In Malaysia alone, MSME face a significant funding gap of about 90 billion ringgit, despite being the backbone of the economy, contributing about 40% of the country's GDP and 50% to total employment. With the mission to bridge this funding gap for a segment that is often overlooked by traditional banks, Kelvin hopes to make our societies a better place, hence the creation of Funding Societies in 2015 to provide accessible, transparent, and efficient financing solutions. Kelvin will take us on his journey with Funding Societies, where they have disbursed more than $3 billion to date to MSMEs across Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me in welcoming Kelvin Teo.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelvin, the co-founder of Funding Societies. We are leading financing and payments platform for SMEs in Southeast Asia, having given out about $1 billion of loans last year. So after hearing a lot of big stats and numbers from all our previous speakers, as a Sunicorn, I thought I would differentiate ourselves by telling more stories, because of course founders are all competitive people, we try to outdo each other, right? So when Rahman and I started Funding Societies in 2015 at a dormitory of Harvard Business School, innovation was very different at that point in time. And this was one of the picture that was taken at our graduation. So that was 1 year after we started Funding Societies, and my classmates from other schools my classmates from other countries was like wondering, why is this Malaysian and Indonesian working so hard and dozing off at their own graduation? And we realized that innovation has changed, and why we have started Funding Societies at that point in time was really due to one talk. It was a talk given by Peter Thiel at Harvard when he was trying to sell his book, 0 to 1. And he made an interesting comment. Asia does not need innovation. Asia just needs execution. Because Asia is so far behind innovation, therefore all you need is to execute and catch up. And in 2015, unfortunately, that was true and was really annoying. So we took it upon ourselves to start Funding Societies. And at that time, you'll notice that most of the startups are clones. Hey, I'm the Netflix of Asia, I'm the Facebook of Asia, I'm the Uber of Asia, so on and so forth, right? But fast forward to today, you'll notice that innovation has changed, that startups in Southeast Asia is no longer clones. They are very much mutants. Hey, and the most obvious example is ride-sharing. So we have started off as a ride-sharing company, expanded into payments, and then subsequently deliveries. And even within Funding Societies ourselves, we started as a peer-to-peer financing platform, and before we started the company, we took the opportunity to visit all the major P2Ps in US and speak to the ones in UK, because as Harvard students, they kind of open up the doors and tell you everything that you want to know, right? And it helps us in terms of building our own business in Southeast Asia. But even then, 18 months after we launched Funding Societies, we've started evolving, pivoting beyond peer-to-peer financing because of a temporary change in regulations in Singapore. And we have continuously evolved ever since, including up to last year, whereby we acquired a Sequoia payments company called CutUp, so that to help us to expand our business from financing to payments business. So today we'll be talking about the hard things of innovation in Southeast Asia from a local founder's perspective. I think the first thing that we realize is that when it comes to innovation in Southeast Asia, it really entails a long game. It really entails a long game. So when Sequoia invested in us in 2016 upon our graduation, the partner was telling us and kind of hinting to us that, hey, Kelvin, based on statistics, a company becomes a unicorn within 7 years. A company becomes a unicorn within 7 years, based on their statistics. But when we look at Southeast Asia, the tech firm's gestation period oftentimes is much longer. If you look at Property Guru, it started in 2007. Tokopedia, 2009. Garena and now C also started in 2009. And they only hit prominence around 2015 to 2018 or so. And they became listed just the last 18 months or so. So almost a 14, 15-year period in terms of gestation. And we often talk about market fragmentation, but the reality is that it does have a huge impact in terms of how fragmented and nascent a market, which causes more time taken for market education, more time taken to build distribution and regulatory clearance, and more time to wait for the customers to increase their willingness and ability to pay. So it really takes much longer, and therefore, I think compared to our US peers overseas, which have a relatively more homogeneous markets, be it in terms of US, China, India, or even Europe, the time to grow actually is a lot longer. So the question is that how much time? If you take a chapter from, say, Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outlier, or even in just recent, the last lecture at Stanford class of 2023 that was given by the Alpine investor founder, Graham Weaver, they indicated that, hey, to build true mastery in an industry or a space, it takes about 10 years. And in Chinese, there's a whole saying that 10年磨一剑, 10 years to sharpen one blade, right? So we think that there is some resemblance in terms of organization building. But we also, and of course, for investors that are present on the floor, you will be thinking that, hey, this is really painfully long. But what we also realize is that once you hit a tipping point of tipping point, you really build an iconic organization within the region. So one of the most memorable investor interviews that I had was with Yuri Milner from DST. So he's the founder of DST, and he's credited for breaking into Silicon Valley and became an early backer of Facebook, of Twitter, of Spotify, so on and so forth, right? And So it was in 2019, I flew to Hong Kong to meet him for 60 minutes. And the interview was really efficient. That after some pleasantries, it was just questions about the business, right? And they break it down mathematically about the business, just rip it apart piece by piece. Hey, almost like an issue tree drivers. And within 20, 30 minutes, he knows all the matrix, all the numbers of the company. And then it's followed by just knowing me as a person to the details of, hey, what do I eat, what time I sleep, what time do I wake up? And finally, I asked a really profound question that still got me thinking until today. So he asked me, Kelvin, what's the biggest bank in Southeast Asia? In 2019, it's DBS Bank, and it was worth 50 billion US dollars. So the next question was that, how big is the SME franchise? So depending on whether you use which matrix, is about 10, 15 billion dollars. Now, of course, DBS Bank is bigger. It has grown from 50 to 65 billion, right? And then he asked me a punchline question, right? That, so Kelvin, within 5 to 10 years, how far can you take? How far can you take? And it really got me thinking in terms of the horizon of thinking of the business, right? That, hey, if you're really focusing on a short-term regulatory change, hey, this bleak market shock, so and so forth, candidly, we can lose our sight very, very quickly. And because of that conversations, it has helped us through to think about longer term and even power through the temporary blips that we experience very, very regularly. So in our view that when it comes to innovation in Southeast Asia, we really need to play the long game because it is what is realistic within Southeast Asia, having such a nascent and fragmented market. The second thing that we realized was that innovation in Southeast Asia really requires you to do it as a tribe, And that, in the Malaysian conceptual paper, we talk about how human capital and leadership is a cornerstone towards development. And we always talk about the talent shortage is a big issue, and I will not go into more details given that that topic has been beaten to death, right? But I think what is exacerbated in Southeast Asia is really that if you look at the US, one genius can really move the needle of the company, be it Steve Wozniak for Apple or even Alan Zhang, who created WeChat. But in Southeast Asia, very rarely can a CTO, CPO make such a difference. In fact, you almost need a tribe, and that tribe probably comes from many of the countries that you're present in Southeast Asia because it's so fragmented as a market. And therefore, we find that it's actually extremely important to build a tribe to even survive or to reach a certain level of scale in Southeast Asia. And that's particularly important in two ways. First, market shocks. Running startups in Southeast Asia is really, really turbulent. Really, really turbulent. If I just look at a map from Funding Society's perspective, in the last 8 years, we spent 3 years speaking to 5 different regulators, trying to getting license, securing license, and creating our own industry class. And in some countries, I need to speak to multiple ministries because everyone wants to have a say on that front. So out of 8 years, we have 3 years on regulations, another 3 years on COVID-19, which is the worst pandemic since 1918, the Spanish flu. And then we are going through a 1+ year of interest hike, which is, again, the highest interest rate in 22 years. So after 8 years, we have been going through 7 years of turbulence. And that's just macro shocks. Domestic shocks. Vietnam, first time you see a change of 3 Politburo members, and that, of course, caused a ton of government projects and subsequently downstream impact to the SMEs. Indonesia reduced its fuel subsidy, which of course again have a spillover effect to the SMEs. And finally, you see the Thai government being under the military rule for probably the longest time since it's starting. And all these changes obviously cause a huge ton of anxiety and uncertainty to team members. And how do you make sure that they stay and weather through this period of time is really to create a tribe together. So that's one, really a tribe necessary because it is what it takes to weather through market shocks. The second reason is really because of talent shocks. And that the key challenge is that we are probably the first generation of startups in Southeast Asia, first and a half generation of startups in Southeast Asia. Most of the people we have hired have not worked in a startup before. So how do they know they will enjoy or actually thrive in working in a startup? And what is worse is that, so we've spoken to tons of experts and we realized that we can only, even the best interview process, reference checks, whatever, you can only have a 50 to 60% success rate of hiring the right person. And why it's worse is that after you hire a person, it takes at least 3 months to know whether the person can work or not. In some roles like tech, it takes even longer, right? And it's also why we are always a bit suspicious about hiring executives or senior folks that have left the company for less than 2 years, because that's when the time you really know got results or not results, right? Or is it just fluff, right? And that also prompted a debate between Ronald and I, right? That as a data-driven person, to me, I always think that the person is innocent until proven guilty, right? That, hey, the person is performing until I really see that he screwed up, right? Whereas Reynolds, as a more intuitive person, he thinks that, hey, if intuitively the person is bad, let's change. And that, unfortunately, over the last 8 years, it turns out that he's correct. And why is that the case? You may not be always right, but the reality is that a mishire can cause a 6 to 12 months damage. And if you think about for a startup cycle, we fundraise every 18 to 24 months. That 6 to 12 months is hugely damaging, right? You hire a new person and you don't even know the second person will deliver or not, right? So it's also why you see that we upgrade our leadership or middle leadership about a third of them every 2 years, because it's important for us to keep upgrading. So, and it's only possible to keep the rest of the team together if you start building a tribe that is loyal to the cause, right? So the question is, what is a tribe? Or at least what is a tribe to us? Based on ChatGPT, the authoritative source, right, that it is defined as a group of people who have shared values and interests. And it's also why we really are grateful when Sequoia invested us in 2016. They gave us some not so good advice, but one very useful advice was that define your core values. Because people who are within my vicinity, my sphere of control, I can actually change them or influence them very quickly, right? But the ones further away that I do not interact on a day-to-day basis, all they see is what I stand from my core values perspective and how I practice them, right? So that has turned out to be very, very important in terms of bringing the people together. So therefore, and when we say tribe, I'm not referring to, hey, condoning poor performance and whatnot, right? At least in my mind is that if you're in part of a tribe, you should owe it to a tribe to contribute your fair share, and if you're not, you should reposition yourself. And it's also why our first CTO is still with us since 2015. Obviously, now he's not a CTO as the company becomes bigger. We have about 100 people in tech versus 5 when he was there, but he's still a VP of engineering. My first hire in 2015 is still with us. He used to be head of sales and marketing. And of course, usually following the Nike growth curve, right, that you have to step down to specialize in some areas. And now he's an acting CTO of Thailand, acting CEO of Thailand, as well as a commercial director for capital markets, right? And even for myself, last year alone, I took about 33 expert calls. Not me giving, me receiving, right? That, hey, this topic I'm not sure. Can I speak to someone in the US who have solved this before? Hey, that topic I'm not sure. 33 expert calls, which is approximately 3 calls a month, right? Excluding like December and whatnot. So really, we see that to drive innovation in Southeast Asia, to really weather through the different trends, market shocks, as well as the talent situation. The only way for you to do is to keep upgrading the team, and to upgrade the team means that you need to build a tribe so that the rest of the people are intact, rather than say, hey, one person leave and you're worried about it. Last is really feed the good leaders. I think Simon Sinek wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last. But what we find is that in Asian culture, we don't brag as much, we just do work and hope that people see it, right? And realize that oftentimes, if you are not careful, leaders don't even eat because you have let others eat first, right? And one example was in 2019, I met a startup that's pretty successful, and that it was started in 2012. And I was shocked to find out that after 7 years of being underpaid, below market, they have not sold a single dollar of shares. So the founders have not sold a single dollar of shares during the whole period of time, and the team did not sell a single dollar of shares during this period of time. I thought, like, dude, you're crazy. Do something about it. And good thing is that the next year they did a sale, and thankfully that he done it on time, such that the team was intact when they go through the tough COVID periods and so forth, right? And some people would say that, hey, Kelvin, this point a bit self-serving, right? But this is really just pragmatic idealism, right? Or practical idealism, right? That if you're not feeding the team, candidly, how do they build a tribe? Like, people go into war with you because they think that there's meat at the end of the day, right? If they go into war with you and you didn't think that they'll be fed anything at the end of the day, who is still going to war with you, right? So this becomes very important in terms of growing the business. And that, when it comes to one critical example, when we think about, I lost my train of thoughts. As I pull out my cheat sheet in terms of the story that we'll be sharing. So when we look at some of the research that is done in the industry, I think Michael Freeman published a report that 72% of founders suffer some sort of mental issues or mental health issues. And that this has, and I'm perfectly fine, I'm at 28%. And that founders' burnout is becoming an increasing, rising cause of company failure. So the reality is that founders may start off not thinking that they need money. But soon they will feel that, because when you become, if you run a long game, you'll start moving from being a single to getting married to having kids to taking care of aging parents. And you'll still be running and working at 2 a.m. every single day. In fact, I just took the first holiday in 8 years last week, right? And that the only way for you to continue sustaining is that you use money to exchange for time. Hire a helper, give private tuition. So it's really using money to give a peace of mind. So, hey, sending your children to private tuitions and whatnot, or to good schools, or even spending for travel for parents while they are still healthy and running, right? So it's really important that we start thinking about it, because otherwise, a lot of the team members or senior members will actually get burnt out quite quickly. I think one may also say that, hey, why do we need to feed? Like, hey, investors should leave first, right? Because investors are putting hard capital there. And that if the company is successful, hey, the founders will be earning a lot. But the reality is that after going through 8 years, we have been very fortunate to outlive many of our competitors and become the market leader. And I look at some of our peers in the market, actually for founders or even leadership team of companies that are not successful, it's really, really painful. Imagine yourself working in extreme hours and that going through a lot of stress and uncertainty. And in this market, the uncertainty is just at a different level, right? If investors are worried, think about founders whose 100% of their life, their youth, sometimes their health are all put into a company, right? At least you are diversified, right? How much stress level it is, right? So I think to that extent, making sure that team members are sufficiently fed during that period of time is very important, because the ones who actually ultimately fail, it can be in a very, very difficult state. And that if more and more people see that, hey, if you work so hard, 90% of the chance you'll be at that state, or worse still, the company does not die, so you can't start anew, but you are still faithful to your team, for your tribe, and therefore you're just chugging along for years, right? Wouldn't that be even worse, right? So at least in my mind is that for us to drive innovation within Southeast Asia, we need a critical mass of talent, especially in a market that's already short of talent. And the only way is that to keep feeding good leaders. Of course, not any random leaders. Of course, not just giving money for free and not tracking periodic milestones, right? But really feeding the good leaders along the way. These are some of the realities check. Candidly, the hard things of innovation is copied from hard things from Ben Horowitz, right? But this is unfortunately, in the last 4 years, I've actually experienced all the hard things that was said by Ben Horowitz, right? That be in terms of laying off when the big goals are missed, be in terms of superstars developing a sense of entitlement, therefore I need to transition them out, be in terms of building a right org structure, but reality is that what speaks between the informal org structure is what really matters. And finally, dreaming big and only realizing that it's turning into a nightmare and you have to fix it, right? So, and this hopefully sheds some light in terms of investors of how some of the founders are thinking within the market. I think finally, I think the last point for the benefit of funding societies is that I think humans always have a very love-hate relationship with money. They say that the love of money is the root of all of evils, right? But at the same time, money is almost necessary for social mobility, for business development, for innovation. It's also why funding societies have spent the last 8 years working on the hard things in Southeast Asia to not just empower SMEs to grow, not just Mama Store to grow bigger, but hopefully with our regional footprint and with our expansion into payments, enable them to be in the internationally competitive business across the region. And so why we are, and the hope is that this will indirectly cause GDP growth, employment growth, and ultimately development bargain. And so why we call ourselves funding societies. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you, Kelvin. Our final speaker for this evening, Sophie Viger, Managing Director of 42, based in Paris, France. Since a young age, Sophie has been passionate about all things geek, from computer to games, science fiction, from coding to programming. And despite a degree in musicology and biology, she began teaching coding at the age of 23. Now, Sophie is at the center of a passion for technology, innovation, diversity, and education through 42, a computer programming school founded by French entrepreneur Xavier Niel. Sophie will share more about 42's mission to revolutionize the way we learn and prepare for the digital age. With 52 campuses across 31 countries, including Malaysia, 42 has provided more than 18,000 students with tuition-free education to empower the next leading generation for IT talents. 42's unique model transcends traditional education methods with project-based learning. What that means is no teachers, no classes, all through hands-on, peer learning, and teamwork. Ladies and gentlemen, here to educate us on 42, please welcome Sophie Viger.
So thank you very much. It's an honor to join our conversation at Khazanah Megatrends Forum this year. And as English is not my mother tongue, as you can hear, if you don't mind, I'm going to use my computer and read my speech. And believe me, it's going to be a better experience for you. And also, I hope you are not too tired, because my session is a bit longer than the others. So I have the chance. I don't know if you have this chance also. We will see at the end. So here it is. So in 2018, I agreed to take over the lead of an IT training school in Paris. I was driven by three main reasons that are dear to my heart, which are innovating, empowering, and sharing. I mean, innovating, it consists in reinventing and revolutionizing the educational system through technology. And empowering by allowing anyone without distinction to learn, grow, dream of a better future, and contribute to society. And sharing this wonderful education model beyond borders or culture by expanding it internationally. So that's why I'm here today to share this extraordinary experiment in education, which will be one of the answers to the great educational needs of the coming decades. So some of you have heard of it. It's called School 42. So it's a computer science school for adults, open to everyone, regardless of their background. The school's first campus was founded 10 years ago in Paris. Since then, we've expanded to 52 campuses in 31 countries around the world. So I'm going to talk to you about, first, the problem we tackle with classical education, pedagogy, and its limits. Then the great inspirers and principles on which 42 model is founded. And then the results and its multiple and positive impacts. So first, what is classical pedagogy? Well, traditional pedagogy is based on a simple principle. A teacher transmits knowledge to students, and that's it. So students have to listen, ask questions if necessary, memorize, and reproduce the teacher's knowledge. It's based on discipline, rote learning, and repetition. And it seems to be common sense. But can I mention the deficiencies with this teaching system? Well, first, teacher. So the teacher is the cornerstone of the traditional system. He and he alone holds the key to knowledge. But this means that, logically, teachers can only teach what they know, and it's a bit limited. Then the teacher can give lessons with passion and enthusiasm, but also without any emotional involvement. But do we learn better through rationality or emotion? Then all knowledge flows in one direction, from the teacher who knows to the student who does not. So the teacher is superior, and there are no or few interactions between the students. But don't students also have something to contribute? And does this intellectual inferiority really benefit students' development? then the system is based on course work, so mainly theoretical. And it's up to the student to relate this theory to his or her own experience. But will students retain better something they are taught or something they discover by themselves? And then, course materials are identical for a given age group without taking into account differences in students' progress or aptitudes. I'm sure you know this quote of Einstein. But how can you adapt to individual difficulties and abilities when you have to teach the same thing at the same time to a group of pupils and the same way and at the same pace? Also, the very layout of the premises is designed to ensure that all students face the teacher. Classrooms are not places for exchanging, but only for listening. So this way of individualizing students prepares them for collaborative work and living together. And last but not least, students must stay in their place. I mean, literally and figuratively. So they must remain seated and not talk to their neighbors. And they must accept what the teacher says and not be critical of it. But does this model leave out two essential skills in today's fast-moving society? Critical thinking and initiative. So, in the 2000s, Xavier Niel, a French tycoon, recognized the lack of digital talents in France, and he decided to create his own computer science school. He was aware of the gap between what is taught in traditional schools and the needs of the companies. And he wanted to create a school that answers that need and unleash the full potential of the students and equip them with long-term skills. So we took the time to look at the great teaching experiments of the past and at neuroscientific research. And inspired by them, we created 42, a school like no other. This is the building in Paris. We have 900 computers and 5,000 students. So what about the great inspirers? First, meet Sugata Mitra. So in 1999, Sugata Mitra, a physics professor, launched an experiment involving the installation of computers in Indian slums, enabling children to use them without any guidance whatsoever. And the children succeeded in learning to use computer and use internet even if they didn't speak English, and without any guidance. His experiment is called the hole in the wall. And he proved that unsupervised learning produces better results. Well, similarly, in the 19th century, a Frenchman by the name of Joseph Jacotot showed that it was possible to learn a foreign language without a teacher. His theory is called ignorant master. And in fact, when you think about it, nobody teaches a child to speak or walk. They do it by themselves through imitation, trial, and error. So at 42, we decided first to remove the teachers. So this is what it looks like inside a 42 campus. As you can see, there is no teacher. Students are working together. So you're probably wondering if there are no teachers, so what does 42 do? So our job was to create a powerful intranet where the students can find exercise of increasing difficulties. So they start with something really simple, like, the Hello World exercise. They do that during the selection process. I will talk to you about that later. So then they do one exercise after another, each one more difficult than the previous ones. And in this way, They build a body of knowledge and skills that enables them to work on more complex projects. So maybe you're wondering how they can do that without teachers, when in fact, some of them try to find solutions by watching videos or reading manuals. They will try a piece of code and try another piece of code, and then they will debate about that. But they will, at the end, find a solution by themselves, and in this way, they will create their own framework of learning. And if there is no teacher, who's going to correct the students? I will talk about that later. So as you can imagine, it's completely changed the approach. The students become actors. And if you can see them, when they find a solution, they are just so happy because they found it by themselves. Also, the students learn at their own pace, and they demonstrate initiative and creativity. Then Albert Bandura. So Albert Bandura is a great theorist of collaborative learning. His social cognitive theory says that individuals can acquire knowledge directly through the observation of others in social interaction and experiences. So at 42, we decided to create a learning context that requires collaboration to succeed, with students exchanging ideas to find solutions to their problems together. Well, this is simply collective intelligence. So the face-to-face training on campus to enable students to observe and imitate each other. And we need 150 students in a cohort at minimum to encourage learning by imitation. Then John Dewey. So John Dewey showed that students learn more effectively by doing and by working with others. And he set up an experimental school at the end of the 19th century based on the principle that all subjects were taught through projects. So that means children learn writing and arithmetic by doing practical tasks like cooking or sewing or woodworking. And the results were astonishing. So at 42, we decided to implement a 100% hands-on project-based curriculum. So here is a project. So this is a simple PDF on which you will find all the constraints. And this is exactly what you can find in a company. When you have a project, there are constraints, and you just need to meet the constraints. So our job was to create these constraints really precisely for each project. So this project is called Cube 3D, and it consists in creating a 3D environment in which you can move. So the idea is, for example, here is a forest. Well, just imagine it's a forest. So if you have to reach the red point, and if a teacher told you, well, to reach this red point, you need to take this path, you can be sure that all the students will take exactly the same path, you know? And they will be happy of that and say, oh, that's what the teacher was waiting for me. But if there is no clue, so it will take longer. But you may see as many different solutions as there are students. And some of them will innovate. Then Maria Montessori. So you may know Maria Montessori. She devoted her life to innovating education of children and published a book, The Child. One of its key ideas is what today seems obvious: not all children learn the same thing in the same way, at the same time, and the same pace. In fact, each person will have a particular learning window. So at 42, we decided to progress at an individual pace. So here is what you face when you enter in 42. So this is the holy graph, like Holy Grail. So when you start, you can go here, up. The first project is here, it's libft. So libft is a library of function in C. And when you start, you apply to this project. And when you succeed in this project, it will unlock the next circle. So you will have 3 new projects, and if you succeed to these 3 new projects, so it will unlock the next circle, and so on, until the last circle. All this part is called the common core. So the common core, some of the students can achieve it in 6 months, others in 2 years. So during the common core, they will learn how to code in C, so we learn algorithm, object-oriented programming, so C++, also a little of network, DevOps, and they will finish at a big web projects. So as you can see, it's respectful of your cognitive skills, your pace, but also your social situation, if you have children to take care of, or if you have a part-time job. And also the building is open 24/7, so that means the students can come whenever they want to work on their project. And I already talked about Albert Bandura. So in 1986, he wrote a book in which he showed that students achieve better learning outcomes when they are self-motivated. So his theory is that people are self-organized, proactive, self-reflective, and self-regulated beings, not just responsive to the external environment. So at 42, we decided to allow free choice of pathway and specialization. So already during the common core, the students sometimes they can choose between 2 projects for 1 knowledge. But when they finish the common core, they can start an internship. They also can start their own business. They also can apply to continue their curriculum in another campus. But they can also proceed in any specialization. They can start with a project in AI, another one in blockchain, or DevOps, or whatever. And they can deep dive in one of the specialization. So they will have this kind of map of skills, which is unique for each student. They can also decide when they graduate. They just have to push a button, and they will be part of the alumni network. Then Jean Piaget. So it seems maybe paradoxical, a pedagogy based on failure. So the Swiss pedagogue Jean Piaget theorized that students learn through trial and error. They learn by making mistakes. Also, another theorist, Stanislas Dehaene, showed that the brain is basically a statistical tool. So it's simply a matter of continually correcting ourselves through feedback. In other words, making mistakes is just fundamental to learning. So that's why we decided to make trial and error completely natural. So the student can try, they can fail, yes, sure, but they can try again, learn, and they can succeed. So here is a ladder for a project. So our job was to create a ladder. So now I can tell you who corrects the students. Well, students correct students. We call that peer evaluation. And to be honest, this is one of the best periods of learning. Because when you have to explain what you've done, there is kind of a special area in your brain that reinforces your knowledge. And when you are the one who is correcting someone, so we will see how we solved this project. But if you correct another students that have done the same project, you will see that there is several ways to solve the problem or to achieve the subject. So our work was to create ladder to help the students to correct the project. So even if they have not done the project, they can correct it. And it will lead to a mark. And to avoid cheating, each project has to be corrected by 5 different students. And in fact, we've created a matching system so they can apply to be corrected or to correct someone on a schedule. And it's only 15 minutes before the start of the correction, that you know who you're going to correct or who is going to correct you. Gamification, so play. Play is deeply connected to learning. In fact, all mammals learn through games, and for good reason. The game allows us to experiment and progress, and the pleasure helps us to memorize the information. So look at cubs. If they start to play chasing and catching as they are young, is to be able to survive when they are adult and catch their prey. So at 42, we decided to normalize trial and error, but also to offer a gamified training. So it's exactly like in a video game. When you start, you have 0 experience point, and you are going to earn experience point each time you succeed in a project. And with experience point, you will gain level. So you start level 0, and you can go up to level 21. There are also some achievements. You can get achievements. There is one which is to hack 42, so 3 students have been able to get this achievement. And there are houses, like in Harry Potter. So when you start, you are randomly added to one of the houses. And when you earn experience points, you earn the experience points for your house. And each year, we organize a very wonderful party at the color of the houses. Also, the last one, Santiago Ramon. So Santiago Ramon is the winner of the Nobel Prize of Medicine in 2006. He discovered how neurons work and proved the need to rest the brain regularly to allow it to reorganize and thus memorize. So that's why at 42 we decided to have campus that is a real place to live, with chill zones, student association. But maybe the most important is we've chosen to create a training program accessible to everyone. That means no tuition fee, no age limit, no diploma or degree required. So we wanted IT to be an opportunity for everyone, no matter your level of education or your social background. And it works. And in fact, diversity is one of the great strengths of 42. And thanks to it, it helps students to work with different people and helps them to understand and really live and feel that diversity is an asset that helps them to have a wider view. So in another word, it helps for innovation and for respect. But as you can imagine, we are one of the best IT schools in the world. We are open to everyone. We are free. So we needed a strong selection process, not based on usual criteria, but based on potential and motivation. So we created the piscine. It means swimming pool in French. So it's learning by immersion. So it involves 4 weeks of selection, including weekends, so every day. The students will learn how to program in C, and at the end, we will keep around 1/3 of the candidates. So it's a strong selection process, but only based on motivation and potential. So, what are the results? Well, first, we have 52 campuses in 31 countries. So you can see here all the cities where we have partners. And as you can see, there is a 42 campus in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur. So our action and success relies on collaboration between the private sector, government policies, and civil society. We received more than 500,000 applicants. We are proud that we already have trained 37,000 students, and we have now 18,000 students. The average age is 26, but the most important, as you can see, is 1/3 of our students have absolutely no diploma. So this number is really important because in general, people without diplomas don't have access to higher education. And they often come from disadvantaged backgrounds. So we are very proud at 42 to welcome them and see them succeed and contribute to the success of others. And we have 22% of women, which is really not enough at all. But as you can see, for example, in Paris, we've made a lot of progress to close the gender gap, and we've reached a third of women. So tomorrow's world is being made by today's computer science students. So if only from a political and creative standpoint, it's extremely important that half the population is not excluded from the making of tomorrow's world. That's why we are working a lot to increase the number of women in 42. So maybe most important, the hiring rate, which is 100%. The average salary is very high in Paris, and as you can see, 12% of the students start their own business and create a startup. So here are the feedback from the companies and big companies. They are all astonished by the students, by the mindset, by the quality of the students. Obviously, it's because we train them with strong hard skills, but not only that, it's also because through this peer learning method, they develop a lot of soft skills like communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving, creativity, and also empathy. And they all lead to innovation. But I think most importantly, thanks to his neuroscience-based pedagogy, 42 teaches his students perseverance. You know, every failure brings you closer to success. And respect for others. Success comes from collaboration. So perseverance and respect are the keys to success in both professional and personal life. So 42 is a school for individual and collective fulfillment. So in conclusion, I hope I convinced you that it's time to revolutionize the education system, and 42 is one of the answers. And it's not a vision or something happening far away from you. There's a 42 campus in Kuala Lumpur, and soon 2 others in Penang and in Iskandar, and thanks to Khazanah and Sunway. And if you want to be part of this adventure, we're lucky enough to have a booth in the forum, so you can meet with the wonderful team of KL, I love you, team of KL, and talk with them after the presentation. And I've heard also there is a 3-minute video about 42 in KL. Thank you very much. Yep.
Education is the foundation upon which societies are built, and it is the driving force behind a nation's progress. Sunway Education Group is fully committed to making quality education affordable and accessible to as many qualified students as possible. It is with this conviction that we partner with ECO42 to establish the first 42 campus in Southeast Asia. In less than 3 years, I'm proud to share that 42KL is already playing a major role in equipping our young people with the skills to succeed in the digital economy. In collaboration with Khazanah Nasional Berhad, we are taking this partnership and our commitment to nation building one step further with 42 Malaysia. 42 Malaysia is charting the path for our nation to become the leading digital economy in ASEAN. Join us in this mission to shape a more progressive, inclusive, and sustainable future for all under the Malaysian sun.
A key part of our mandate is to embark on strategic investments to advance the nation as guided by our Advancing Malaysia strategy. Of course, one key avenue for change is education. When we first considered investments that serve this space, we were excited by 42KL. This model will help increase social mobility and help address the tech talent supply gap. The partnership with Sunway Education Group through 42 Malaysia serves to accelerate the model nationwide and ultimately develop 10,000 highly skilled tech talents within the next 10 years. This is not just an education-related initiative, it is a nation-building endeavor to establish a digitally empowered Malaysia and strengthen our nation's fourth industrial revolution capabilities. But we recognize that more can be done. We aim to take 42 Malaysia to greater heights for Malaysians to benefit from quality education as well as nurture talent necessary to propel Malaysia to become a digital economy leader in the region. With that, we call upon GLICs, GLCs, MNCs, industry and corporate leaders to join us in this journey. Your contribution can make a significant difference, ensuring that we have a pipeline of highly skilled talent ready to meet the challenges of tomorrow. Thank you everyone for being part of this journey.
Thank you, Sophie, and the speakers today. As we conclude the exploration of innovation without borders, we are reminded that the potential of human ingenuity transcends the limitation of boundaries. Whether it is in venture capital, travel experiences, semiconductors, financing, or education, our speakers today provided a sense of shared purpose to push towards the frontier of knowledge and address global challenges collectively. Together, we can shape the world where innovation truly knows no borders, opening up a world of endless possibility and progress for all. With that, thank you.